Today's program is devoted to the third most important priority of generalized means of governance of conceptual power, ideological. What is its main task included in?
The task of ideological priority is to clothe an implementable, hermetically sealed, closed conception in forms attractive to the people that are very far from the essence of the solved problems. Remember Gorbachev's slogans: acceleration of socio-economic development, the fight against drunkenness, socialism with a human face, friendship between peoples. What did we get as a result? Everything came true, but exactly the opposite. The collapse of industry, the alcoholization of the people all over the country, capitalism with an animal grin, an internal Russian war. In other words, by announcement, one thing; in doings and by default, exactly the opposite. This is the main feature of psychological Trotskyism. Evaluations of leaders like Gorbachev, Yeltsin, were given by Fyodor Ivanovich Chuchev, characterizing the attitude of the West towards people like Gorbachev and Yeltsin. The only one who has walked away from their disgrace, and has not succumbed to their enmity, is he who for his own kind, everywhere and always, has been the foremost miscreant. They will only honor our Judas with their kiss. From the standpoint of the conception of social safety, Deadwater, the entire set, including opposing parties, ideologies, movements, is always formed from a higher methodological level of governance. These tools are always used for manipulation in order to solve global problems, the essence of which they do not understand. This senseless dispute between movements of the white and red, Democrats and patriots, globalists and anti-globalists, supporters of planned and market economy, which at the ideological, technological level, is always governed and conducted by conceptual power. Amid this never-ending noise through usury and world money, schemes for ruining our statehood, schemes for ruining our gullible and open people, are being carried out. The destructiveness of the disputes of those who are not able to rise from the level of ideologies to the level of methodology was aptly noted by A.S. Pushkin. Of the remote Parnassian heights, the mettlesome and valiant knights, fence if you must, but with discretion, from vulgar bickering refrain. The herd 'twill only entertain, and as for you, by tender passion, made bitter rivals, pray remain. And the masters of the Euro-American conception of governance absolutely do not care whether we will follow what they have planned and ship cheap raw materials to the West according to the bourgeois democratic scenario. For this scenario we have Gaidar and Nemtsov. According to the Marxist Trotskyist, for this we have Zhuganov, Volsky, Primakov. According to the monarchist scenario, for this we have Mikhalkov. According to the scenario of a strong hand, Zhirinovsky. Or according to Scientology, for this we have Kirienko. You can vote for anyone, it's up to you. But then you will be reproached and told, why are you complaining? You yourself made your choice.
Do you want to say that all the well-known party leaders are a single team and mutually supplement each other?
Yes, indeed. Each of the leaders in our countless parties, hushing up and leaving conceptual power in the defaults, plays their own violin in the united orchestra of Euro-American conceptual power, and their struggle is a struggle for the right to be closer to the global superstate feeding trough, for the right to loyally serve external conceptual power. Our people understood this long ago, albeit at the unconscious levels of the psyche. That is why the number of those who do not vote today significantly exceeds the number of those who have not yet detected this meaningless electoral farce and continue to go to the polls by inertia. But at the last elections in Pskov city and its region, a new phenomenon emerged. In Pskov, a number of those who voted against everyone, as well as the famous 209th district of St. Petersburg, turned out to exceed the number of votes cast for the first candidate. And that is why the city assembly of Pskov was not elected in the first round. This is already a qualitatively new state of the society, testifying to the readiness to accept not new parties, but a new conception of governance, a conception that exposes the entire mechanism of the currently operating parties and ideologies, and that is proposed by the conceptual party Unity, created in April 2000 according to the new law on political parties. It already has its branches in 60 regions of Russia. The future belongs to this party. There is reason to believe that it will be supported, not only by protest voters, but also by those who do not vote.
Viktor Alexeyevich, You say that the currently dominant biblical conception has been working for more than 3,000 years. Could you, in support of this, give an example from the past, when the ideological priority was used by conceptual power in what is called in the dark, as in the days of Gorbachev?
In the history of mankind, higher level priorities of governance have always used the third, in terms of power, ideological priority for the implementation of global scenarios designed for centuries. I will give you a typical example of the manipulation of ideological pawns, like in the example of Gorbachev. It is the middle of the 4th century AD. Biblical Christianity, despite all efforts, does not enjoy sustained acceptance in society. The system of conceptual power assigns a mentor to Julian, a cousin of the Emperor of the Roman Empire, who honorably serves in the field of Christianity. Under the influence of the initiations of the Hierophant mentor, Maximus of Ephesus, Julian, who later received the prefix apostate, begins to sharply oppose Christianity from pagan positions. For this, he is promoted up the hierarchical ladder. He becomes the leader of the army, and then the emperor, and begins to create true atrocities against Christians. He burns temples, brings the situation to the point of absurdity. The spring of indignation and detestment is compressed among the people. At the right moment, Julian is physically eliminated, and the decompressed spring of public opinion makes it possible to transfer the development of Christianity into a stable phase.
Apparently, it was not accidental that you recalled this historical episode and want to say that it has analogies in modern conditions.
Precisely so. After all, Y.V. Andropov, as an initiate of the biblical conception, was exactly the same mentor to the unrestrained, chatty architect of perestroika. I hope the radio listeners understand that if Gorbachev's masters had really had plans to build capitalism in Russia, they would have found for this purpose someone else, but not mere talkers, junior researchers, and people like Gaidar. Only the dreamers Democrats have not yet understood that the plans to build capitalism are just a screen that hides fundamentally different scenarios which have been covered up for our senseless elite until the right time comes. But the biblical scenario writers in relation to our country will misfire at the finish line. There will be no return to the Marxist Trotskyist path that they desire so much. Their scenario is exposed by our book, Trotskyism Was Yesterday, but in no way tomorrow. We will devote a separate program to the Marxist doctrine as a secular version of the biblical conception that is destructive for Russia. Our country will go its own autocratic way on the basis of the conception of social safety, dead water. The people who fell for Western values, from hot dogs to Bush's legs to the so-called high art, received a powerful inoculation from the dirt and evil that infected Western civilization. In the country, the preparation to a complete standard operation to eliminate the elite mired in vices, known among the initiates as the short overstag, is on the way. The ship of our statehood was so intensively dragged all the time to the left that they did not notice how it, having passed along the loop, as a result went to the right and fell on the previous path of future crisis-free development.
Could you show a specific example of conceptual power working on the ideological priority?
Up to 90% of the effective impact on society is provided through television. That is why the biblical conceptual power works on the ideological priority, first of all, through television, which is purely social magic, a method of neurolinguistic programming of the population, and especially the young generation. It is through television pictures that the worldview is formed today. It will be of a certain kind if the child sees Russian tales, where dobro triumphs over evil, and of another kind if pictures of murder and debauchery flash before his eyes. This is precisely what lies at the basis of the revision of the direction of television programs. In the future, a grown-up child will calmly, without protest, perceive these pictures in life in a certain way. Everything that is shown on television inevitably imprints into life practice. Back in Soviet times, according to the first deputy chairman of the KGB, F.D. Babkov, the demonstration of the fact of self-immolation by the eternal flame led to a launch of a whole series of similar cases, which did not stop until they stopped showing this. If the fact of the escape of a soldier, his shooting at his colleagues, appears on TV screens, then this simply cannot but provoke a series of similar cases. This is not just a medical fact. it can be rigorously proven scientifically, but we won't do it because of lack of time. Take chapter 21 of The Golden Calf, a satirical novel by Soviet authors Ilf and Petrov, published in 1931. As soon as the Chamberlain Mitrich and everyone else following behind him began to talk about the fire, the house simply could not but catch fire, and flared up simultaneously from six ends. Ilf and Petrov knew what kind of algorithmics they announced. The most harmless, as our people believe today, are TV shows like The Wheel of Fortune, Win a Million, etc. But do you think that they waste airtime, unthinkable in value, for our entertainment? No, they don't. These are the most socially dangerous programs. By the hands of the Galkins, Yakuboviches, and the like, the unconscious levels of the psyche of the entire generation are programmed to receive income outside the sphere of creation. Algorithms for the implementation of these settings in adulthood will be definitely antisocial. Is it by chance that hardly any program shows a grain grower or a person working in a field? Maybe some also perceive the endless performances of comedians on all TV channels and in concert halls without any connection with the measures aimed at destroying our statehood. For them we explain that the initiates long ago orchestrated the method of removing the protective immunity of society from any evil with the help of comedians and humorists. After the evil is publicly ridiculed, it can be applied without any problems to others. So the world-famous comedian Charlie Chaplin lulled the public consciousness by endlessly parodying Hitler. It was for this that those who wrote the script of Hitler's atrocities and funding erected the only monument on the shores of Lake Geneva to Chaplin.
Viktor Alexeyevich, you gave convincing examples, but is it possible to identify a general methodology for solving ideological tasks?
The methodology of biblical conceptual power is surprisingly simple. Divide and conquer. As a rule, the propaganda machine offers the people of the governed country a choice of two equally false versions, between which the pendulum of public consciousness is swung. At the level of methodology, for example, initiates know about a real alternative concerning the view on creation, for unity or tri-unity. For the crowd, there exists the for-unity, the question about the primacy of matter, materialism, or information, spirit, idealism, as the fundamental question of philosophy. Over the centuries, the pendulum of non-understanding has been swinging from idealism to materialism and vice versa. This is important, that the people do not understand that such a question does not exist in nature at all. Matter and information are one and inseparable. There is no matter in general, it is always specific and has specific informational characteristics. Information and consciousness also, in any case, have a specific material source. Thus, by artificially breaking this holism of creation, two allegedly scientific schools of materialists and idealists are formed, which skillfully drown elementary truth in their centuries-old disputes. At the level of the third priority, the alternative for initiates is the recognition or non-recognition of the one for all who live on earth, God, the Creator and Almighty. The crowd is offered a choice of two delusions that equally do not recognize the fact of the existence of one God. The choice is between materialistic atheism, there is neither God nor messengers of God, with which we were zombified after 1917, and idealistic atheism, replacing the true idea of the existence of one God with the false ideas of all, without exception, church hierarchs about the need to recognize, by people, constructed pseudo-gods. Herewith, its own certain so-called God is given to every nation and peoples, thanks to which wars are organized, Huguenots, Catholics, Christians, Muslims, etc.
Could you give examples from the sphere of social structure, social life arrangements, economics?
In the sphere of social structure in Russia, the process of swinging the pendulum of non-understanding from capitalism to socialism and vice versa is especially obvious. Moreover, due to the effect of the law of time, now these swings have a short period, and they can be seen during the lifetime of one generation. Meanwhile, the path from ruin to prosperity lies not at all in which type of ownership prevails, private or public. The question is whether subordinist and conceptual autocracy dominates in our country, or whether our country is organized according to the principle of the crowd elite, with the latter enclosed to the external contour of governance, to conceptual power alien to our people. What elite is the dominant, and what terminology this elite uses to cover its selfish aspirations of a pseudo-communist or capitalist character is not important. In the sphere of economics, we worked out schemes that give one understanding of the main Marxist-Leninist contradictions between labor and capital, between an employee, wage labor, and an enterprise owner, the contradictions developed according to the scenario of conceptual power. This purposefully created contradiction made it possible for more than a century to close the information that came up to the surface about the real contradiction between the participants in productive labor, both owners and employees, and the credit financial system, which oppresses the owners on the basis of legalized theft through loan interest. The holistic sphere of material production was divided into two parts, which were pitted against one another, and then they continued to rob them with impunity. The scheme of real oppression is a secret, sealed with 7 seals. You will not hear even a hint about this scheme from the lips of the fiery fighters for the happiness of the people who constantly appear on television. We examined the scheme in the previous program. The symbol of the vicious ideology imposed on Russian society is the Russian coat of arms, in the form of a 2-headed eagle, a symbol of a duality of mind, enclosement to external conceptual power, a symbol of conceptual non-determination of governance in Russia. With any theoretical cover of this blasphemous symbol, its exact description was given at one time by a sailor to whom the Tsar asked a question during the check. "What is the 2-headed eagle?" he asked the sailor. "A freak, your majesty," without thinking for a second, engraved the sailor.